All right, welcome to another episode of Panakal podcast for geeks, the show about good friends hanging out, talking about the things we love. In this case, it's
There you
finance, so it might not be something everybody loves. Sorry, guys. You guys all know my co-host Andrew Sides, and our
Hey.
guest today is Sam Fritz, who is married to Tawny Fritz. Has been on the show a bunch of times. But every time I talk to Tawny about financing and some stuff like that, she always talks about how much Sam knows about it. Sam, you have a degree also as not a CPA.
No, I have a degree in economics and finance.
There you go. And so he knows. So I should also, what was it?
Give you the disclaimer.
Disclaimer at the beginning of the episode,
that.
which Sam is going to give a bunch of advice on the show today about financing and budgeting and such. It's all advice. You can use it if you want to. And if it doesn't work for you, don't blame Sam. Definitely don't blame us. Because we don't care. But that's the disclaimer. It's not, it's all advice. Do what you want with it. And so we can just start with the questions we've got, or we can just catch up for a minute. We were talking about the weather earlier. I don't know what the weather in Colorado is like 7 degrees, right?
I was gonna say you
yeah.
guys are you're like way west, Sam, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Florida's got a hurricane apparently. Potential.
It's the whole East Coast, dude. Like all the way from New Hampshire down here.
You guys have a hurricane like every 3 months.
No, it's not a hurricane. It's just like a weird weather band that's stretching the entire eastern seaboard. No idea why. And it's not like giving us hurricane winds or anything. It's just like really crazy rain.
Gotcha.
And stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
We had slushy rain all day. And then I waited it out because I was like, it's just going to melt away. And then it turned into snow. And I was like, I guess I have to plow the driveway. And I plowed the sidewalk. And it just kept going. So I did it again. And then I was like, fuck this. Like, I ain't got nowhere to go. So, like, what am I doing? All right, well, if you want to just dive right in, we can start. We can start with the questions we sent you earlier, if you want, Sam. Is that cool? Or do you want to start with some of yours? You want to start with how you would normally address this type of situation? You might end up answering these questions on your own.
Yeah, just sort of just give you an overview. Like I said, I've got a degree in economics and finance. I've always had this sort of an eye for finance. I've helped Tawny and I in 9 years. We're going to pay off a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah.
Wow.
On a single income.
That's impressive.
So I've always done pretty well with finance. The last time I lost a job, they actually laid off our entire office. So we had 30 people with similar resumes trying to find jobs. So it took a little while.
Mm-hmm.
In that 9 months of being unemployed, we didn't touch our emergency fund, and we actually took a trip to Disney.
Damn.
Oh
my gosh.
When I came off, I still had $12,000 for down payment on a house, and after not being employed for 9 months.
So you must have had a lot of money saved up. That's pretty impressive.
It took some doing, but and really what all these questions that I've read that you sent me, really all of them boil down to just budgeting. And the one thing I've noticed amongst anyone I've talked to plenty of my coworkers, I've talked to a few family members and all, and it's really just budgeting that people, I think, tend to have the biggest problem with. I helped a lady I work with get rid of some of her debt. She actually had credit card debt, a couple vehicle loans, and a substantial amount of debt. And her and her husband had combined income around $225,000.
Dang, how can
was
you
their
be in debt with that much?
It's like you should have no problem with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I told her. I said I would have been retired at 35. I've been making that kind of money.
Right.
Yeah.
She's just spending money on everything, apparently.
Yeah, and it's really, like I said, it comes down to budgeting. And one thing I've noticed in that I've noticed in the art world, and I'm going to speak from my point of view as what I've seen in the art world. And of course, everyone's going to say, "Oh, that's not how I see it." But from what I've seen in the art world is artists, like it or not, you have to be both artist and business person.
Yeah.
There's no way around it, especially when you're first starting off. You're not going to be able to afford, all these different pieces. You know, you may not even be able to afford your own CPA or your own tax person. You're learning all this and doing all this yourself. And the thing that I try to tell people is they have to get comfortable talking about numbers. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that, you know, being a government employee, it's always kind of easy because if you're talking to someone else and you're interested in what they do and you're not sure if you want to make a move, really all you have to do is ask them, what's your, you know, what's your grade, you know, and they'll say like, oh, I'm a GS 10, GS 12.
And
All you
there's
have to
a
do is go
definite
to,
income scale on that. Yeah.
yeah, it's just an income scale that you can go and
Yeah.
you look at and be like, all right, that's where this person's at, you know, now I
Mm-hmm.
know where I'm moving. So, and you know, it was really back in like the 50s and 60s when women and minorities really started joining the workplace, when all these companies started saying, you know, you can't talk about how much money you make, you can't talk about numbers. And there was actually it was a ruling handed down by the Supreme Court stating that companies couldn't stop their employees from talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason was all these companies didn't want the women and minorities to know how much more their white counterparts were getting
Yeah.
paid.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Should be mentioned that that is anytime anyone ever says any of that, they're full of shit. Like, feel free to ask your coworkers and talk freely about that kind of stuff.
exactly. And you know, even where I work, you know, I'll be talking to someone and I'll say, oh well, you know, I'll just say like, oh yeah, I'm putting this much toward my retirement, or I'm doing this. And they look at me like my head's screwed on backwards because I'm trying to talk, you know, money. And a great example of this is a lady I work with just recently. She has a 19-year-old. He just graduated from high school, and his buddy hooked him up with full-time job at Walmart, like a legit 40 hours a week full-time job at Walmart.
Okay.
And she was talking about how he's trying to spend all this money and blah blah blah. And I asked her, I said, "Does he know how much money you make? Does he know how much you have to pay for mortgage, for car, for insurance?" And oh, of course, no, of course, my son doesn't know how much money I make. I said, "So y'all make the same amount?"
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Sam, I've worked in government 20 years. My son's just started at Walmart. You know that's not true." I was like, "I know it's not true. You know it's not true. Does a 19-year-old kid know that's not true? No,
Yeah.
you both have full-time job. You obviously make the same." And I think
Right.
artists do the same thing sometimes. It's I'm an artist, he's an artist. We, you know, obviously we got the same kind of income. We've got the same kind of and that's not the case. So, you know, I hear people say things like, "Oh, I had a good show." Oh,
Yeah.
what is a good show? You know, and even until you really drill down to the details of the numbers, me,
Right.
I'll talk about numbers at work and I'll be like, well, you know, I'll say something like, well, you know, if they really thought about it, they would try to put the least amount of people on afternoon and evening shift because then, you know, they wouldn't have to pay us that 10% differential. It would save them this much over, you know, the course of a budget year. And people I work with just like, I don't think management thinks like that because they don't think of it like a business.
Right.
Mhm.
But and, you know, that's just always where my head goes. So I try to remind people that, you know, if Tawny and I were to do Colorado Springs Comic Con, and if we were, you know, we'd only have to, you know, make 2 or 3 grand profit, and we'd be like, yeah, that's a great show, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because we've got no travel cost, we've got no extra food cost, we've got no, you know, hotel cost.
And that's
That would
always
be a
the
good
stuff
show
that really
for
eats
us.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
and
artists don't calculate all their. They only calculate the costs of how much are they going to make. They never calculate the cost of all the stuff they need to spend that money on first.
Alan, when did you start, like, because you've done shows far longer and way more than me. Like, when did you start, like, really taking that into account, being like, oh, like,
You have a
you know,
kid.
because everyone starts and says like, oh, I did a good show, but then it's really like what Sam said, like, they don't factor in expenses, and it's like when you actually do, then it's like, oh, actually, I'm like 300 in the hole or whatever. Like, I'm in the red on this. Like,
I
when did
mean,
that
like I
shift
used to,
for
like
you?
I literally used to make like $1,000 at a show, and I'd be like, I had a great show, and
right,
but you know, and then but you know, as my business grew and the expenses grew, and then also now we as you know, when I was by myself running the business, it was a whole different thing. But once I was dating Nance, and once we were married, now more expenses. And then once we had a kid, that's when I was really like, we need to budget better because I realized not only were I was bringing in money, but it was just gone. And I'd be looking at my business account like, I just made a bunch of money and it's gone so quickly. What's happening here?
Yeah.
So also I was just ordering, there's a bunch of stuff artists don't do. It just, they just willy-nilly order stock. And I'm like, you got to keep good inventory. You got to like keep tracking your numbers. So there's stuff that's not actually selling. You're just like, I need to restock all of this. It's like, no, you don't. You only need that one thing that's selling.
Yeah, and it takes a while. I mean, that's really something that you have to learn at. And that's one of my main points here, is we all suck at mental math. All right, I always try to tell people this, and I've had people who I've talked to them like, oh no, I'm good with my stuff. I'm good with my math. I'm like, oh, how much do you usually spend a month on going out to eat? And they're like, oh, only like 150 bucks. Okay. So let's go over last month's receipts, your credit
Right.
card, debit card statements. Let's see how much you spent. Usually by the time they get to about 180, they just like, okay, well, that's enough of that. Let's let's just say that
Oh
I
yeah,
got
you
that
get
wrong. I'm like, yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've told people like I used to use Mint, but Quicken has I don't remember what it's called now. It's the same stuff. Mint is free. It basically you tell it to track your spending on entertainment, food, groceries, whatever. You basically put all the credit cards you have into the system, and every week it literally sends you a thing. Like it'll literally be like, you spent the most money on entertainment this month. Like if I had to design the program, I would design it to talk to you and be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like the most money should have been like groceries, because groceries are super expensive right now, right? Or anything to do with your house should be on top of that list, I think, and then everything else is coming down that list. But if your entertainment budget is the highest, are you some kind of movie star, rap star, singer that I'm not aware of? Like, what's happening here? So those kind of programs really help me. Like you were saying, Sam, it's like you need to get that lesson, and then hopefully you only have to learn that lesson 2 or 3 times before you're like, I need to get my shit together.
Yeah, yeah, and I love Excel spreadsheets. That's
God,
what
that's your thing, man.
I know, and some people hate them. I understand, but Excel spreadsheets, I love those. Just writing stuff down. I mean, years ago, I talked to my little brother. He started writing things down. He's still, I
Yep,
mean, he's got these notebooks that he's had
that's
for
what I have.
years, and he writes down every little expense.
Yep,
And because these big companies, they know that nickel and diming people are the way to go now. That's why everything's becoming subscription.
Yeah.
right.
Because you tell someone, oh, this is only $2 a day, that number doesn't scare them. If you're like, oh, that's $730 a year,
Right.
all of a sudden it starts to, the numbers become real. They become, big. So yeah, definitely you want to write stuff down. You want to take down every detail, and you just want to start budgeting, and I always tell people, you want to learn what you need to live off of for like a month, what you need to keep roof over your head and food in your stomach for a month.
Okay. Yep.
And once you have that number, then, if it comes down to, like, let's say you have a show, or, you just finished something for a client, uh, you get that payment. If you know what you need for the month, you know how much you need to take out of that to survive. And then you see what you have left over, and that's what you can start putting toward, you know, your other expenses, your entertainment. It's I saw one of your questions were, what should we stop wasting money on? And I always told people that once you've got your basic necessities covered, once you've got some money put into savings, once you have some money set aside for retirement, once those things are set, I don't care what you spend your money on. If you want to go blow it on the dog track on the first dog does his business for the race, go place a bet,
Right.
like that's fine. Because I understand, I'm not going to judge anyone and be like, oh, video consoles are a waste of money. And then I go out and sit on a block of ice and fish, for the weekend ice fishing. A lot of people think that's a waste of money. But so yeah, once you learn what your base costs are, and this is something that everyone always wants. Everyone wants a one size fits all thing. Everyone would ask, like, Sam, how much money should I have in my emergency fund? I
Depends.
have no. Yeah, it all depends.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
there's so many factors to
it, yeah, if I said $5,000 in your emergency fund, but you live in a loft apartment in New York City, that $5,000
Right.
not going to last you
Not gonna
very long.
last.
You live in a
So
trailer in the Midwest, it could last a year. You
yeah.
know, it
So a
all
piece of advice
depends.
my cousin had given me in like when I was really young, when I was first looking to buy my first condo, right? I was in a first off, I had a serious amount of credit card debt. So I worked 3 jobs, paid it all down. I lived in the city. I wanted a condo in the city. And one piece of advice he gave me that really helped was he said, make sure you have 6 months. So whatever your mortgage, calculate your mortgage on that, your estimate, right? So like if you think your mortgage is gonna be 900 a month, round it up to 1,000. So let's just say it's $1,000 a month. He said you should have 6 to 8 months worth of mortgage saved up just so you have a place to live in case you lose your job, so you won't have any money. And then on top of that, figure out what you might spend on groceries per month. Then he's like, you should have 6 to 8 months worth of groceries total saved up. And then everything else is you need shelter and food, right? Like while you're maybe looking for work if you got fired. And I did exactly what he said. I saved up 6 months worth of mortgage, which really helped me when I bought my first place. Because even though when my budget got tight, I can still be like, if I need it, I have this emergency fund of money sitting there, which is what I ended up using as a down payment essentially when I bought this house. So, because I hung on to it for like
And
10 fucking years.
yeah, and 6 months, and again, it all depends. Like for me, I feel comfortable with 2 to 3 months
Right.
because I'm in a really fairly secure job. I mean, it would take pretty much, act of Congress to, really for me to completely lose my job. It would take a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Uh, but when you do something, like art or, you're in business for yourself and you're not sure, when the next thing's coming,
Right.
that's where, I mean, this is where the budget, is really, I think even more important than ever. And like I said, if you have a month, because I've always heard it called feast and famine, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really what your business is all about. Because you have 2 big shows in a month. Well, now you've got probably far more than you need for a month's worth of living. But if you know
Yes.
how much you need per month, you know how much you need to live on through the end of the year. And then you can keep track and say, okay, month one, I met enough for 2 months. So now I'm good for this month and that month. Instead of using the extra money, you just keep that aside for the next month in case you come up short. That way you always know you at least have those
Yep.
basic needs met.
something in
You,
the
you'll
tank. Yeah.
Yeah, you always at least have that met. So if you do, do a job where you don't get paid for 30, 60, or 90 days, after the job's over, that's fine because you've got the money to make it to that point. And then once you get that money, that might take you another 3 months. And then from there, that's when you can start, looking toward, other things because like you ask spending money to making money, and
Yeah.
that is that is definitely true to a point. And I think that point is that when Tawny first started art, she's like, I've got to go do this show, and I'm like, okay, that's going to cost a lot of money
Right.
for us to get there, do all. And she's like, but that's the big show, that's the one everyone's talking about. And so really, I thought about it uh, as this acronym of okay, she used New Caveman, looking at how the cavemen do it. And she's like, cavemen go out there and they hunt buffalo. I'm going to go hunt buffalo, baby. You don't even have a spear yet. Like we have to
Right.
start, you got to start small. You kind of have to build your way up to that stuff. And so we kind of did it backwards. We did a couple real big shows, backed off, started
Sure.
doing smaller shows. And now she's doing these little local shows that we find are working great.
Yeah.
These small local shows, make us a few $100 a weekend. And it's enough for her to order the stock that she needs for, the next big show. Or if she wants to, get some new product of some sort. These little shows are really helping her do that. It's really sort of snowballing and making it to where we're not, you know, obviously I do not do debt. We haven't had consumer debt for just over 12 years, I think.
That's cool.
Um, and no car payments, no, like nothing. The only debt we've had has been the house. And like I said, hopefully that'll be gone this year. So by doing this, a lot of people want to go out and they just want to jump in. They just want to do the big show,
Yeah.
put it all on the credit card, and just hope for the best. And that's
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 that's a bad idea.
I've
We've
seen
had
bad
artists.
results.
Well, once or twice a week I'll get on a call with a bunch of artists and we'll just art, right? And one artist, I'm not gonna call him out, but he was talking about how he's gonna do this show and he's like, I'll just put out my credit card and I'll do this. I'm like, slow down. I was like, you're looking at the rest of us. Like, if people look at my booth all the time and they're like, oh wow, you're killing it. I'm like, yeah, but this is year 10. I've been so I've been doing it since 2014. And if you saw my early setup to where I'm at now, I grew it over time. It evolved, which is what you're essentially supposed to do. And in my head, I also had someone told me once that it takes 5 years to get to where you want to be, and the rest of it's you building it from there. And it is actually pretty accurate. And so I was telling him, I was like, don't just willy-nilly put something on your business card expecting to make that money back at the show. Because what happens is you're not going to make that money back because no one knows who the fuck you are. It's your first time at the show. And if you don't make them, now lightning might strike. You might actually make it all back, But let's just assume you won't, because that's how life works these days. Now you've got all this debt on your credit card and no money to pay it off. So it didn't work out in your favor. So I was like, get just the bare necessities when you start. Just get what you need to make a little bit at a time. It's like running a strategic Kickstarter program. You make a small Kickstarter, make some money, push that to the next Kickstarter. Make a little bit more money, push that to the next Kickstarter. Take a little bit, if you have anything extra, like anytime I have extra, I have a savings account, I just put it in there. And then I don't know what your take is on like a Roth. Nowadays, if I have extra money, I've been putting it into a Roth just to be like, this is extra, I can put it here. But, is that the best strategy? I don't know. It's money I can't touch,
Yeah, saving for retirement, saving for the future, of course, like I said, I think I'm pretty much maxed out on my TSP, which is like the Roth, what's that, I guess, IRA,
it's like
401k.
you max that out for forever, or I thought it was a cap per year.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much got it to where it's capped.
For the year.
Yeah, for the year.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive, man, because it's January 9th.
No.
Oh, okay.
Every paycheck.
Yeah.
I put in.
Oh, okay, I got you now.
Paycheck.
Okay.
So by the end of the year,
you hit it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because they're like, you can put like X in. Like, it's like, get to that number.
Yeah. And people, they always ask, like, again, it's how much should I save for retirement? What percentage of my paycheck? What? And I always tell people, it all depends. Do you want to sit on your front porch sipping sweet tea at age 70, or do you want to retire at age 40 and travel the world? Because those are going to be two completely different ways of approaching how much you save and what you need to save, And so, but I like what you're saying about, not just throwing all on the credit card, because it is like, it's a lot, especially with this business, of just learning. And it took me a while to get Tawny in the habit of taking stock, realizing figuring out exactly what's selling, what's not selling.
Right.
And her and I will sit down. We'll have business meetings where she's like, "All right, babe, I'm gonna ask you a question about something. It's business meeting time." And at that point, there are no hurt feelings.
Right.
It's I tell her exactly what. No, that's not going to make money, or that might. And it's taken us years. And we've learned, that it's better to sell out of something at a show. And a lot of people are like, oh, I sold out of this thing, because I only bought 2 of them. Well, yeah, but that's better than sitting there with a stack of 50 prints that never sell.
Yep.
Right.
It's better to sell out of this show. Next show, okay, buy 12 or 15. Next show, 30. Now she's got prints that she's like, I'm going to buy 80 of these or 100 of these. And I'm like, yep. I mean, she's got specific pieces of art that if she was like, babe, I'm going to put this on mud flaps and sell it to truckers, I'd be like, go for it, because it's going to sell. It's sold on everything else we put it on. The risk has gotten a lot smaller at this point.
Right.
And the money that she's using to buy the stock has come from, previous shows. It's all snowballed. It's come from, okay, well, we're only going to buy 5 of these prints, see if they sold. All 5 of them sold. All right, next time we're going to buy 20 prints and some pins with them on there, and we're just going to keep building that stock up to where we're at now. And exactly like you just said, we just added lights this year to her setup. And lights are great, and I'll tell people, like, this year that really took our booth to the next level, setting up these lights. Or and I remember back when it was the flourish panels, that was the thing that really, that was like the next big step that works great for us, and all this. And people come and be like, okay, so I need flourish panels and I need lights. And I'm like, no, you
need a
might
banner.
not need any of that yet.
Yeah.
You need something with your name on it.
Right.
You need to start small until you'll learn really, what works for you. And like you said right there,
It's hard. It's hard for artists to do that because they see. Because I myself, the reason I know the credit card issue that I told my friend about is because I myself made that mistake when I was starting early, right? Because when you see other artists that you look up to or other artists that you're at the show with doing so well, and you're like, what do they have that I don't have? A lot of product, lights, right? Pro panels or flourish panels, right? So you're like, oh, I need all of this stuff. And the problem is they don't realize that the thing that's really moving their stuff from the jump is their work, is their art, right? And I'm talking just as an artist, right? Of selling their products at a show. Our art is what's selling the stuff. It's not all the extra stuff. All the extra stuff just makes it look a little extra special, So I always tell people, I'm like, you just need a banner and a table and at least 8 prints when you start. And then I tell them there's no way for you to know which prints are your most popular prints until you start doing shows. And once you know that number, the easiest way to start, I tell them, is 20 of your best-selling prints, 10 of the middle ground, and 5 of the worst that may or may not sell. So you're not sitting on a lot of prints there. You're sitting on maybe 100, right? And depending on where you get your prints made, that probably costs you about $100, $200. Now, like you were saying, inventory, stock. I hate Excel sheets, but I do have Google Sheets set up with, because it's free. And, and basically with the, what do you call those? The algorithms or whatever that calculate for me. So I have a Google Sheet set up where the main first sheet is all my inventory. And then the next sheets are separated based on show. So say Gen Con, Dragon Con, whatever show I'm at. And we'll use Gen Con as an example. So I look at the main sheet, and when I go to the Gen Con sheet and I say, I'm going to bring 10, like metal and playmat sell for me. So if I say I'm going to sell 10 of this specific piece to Gen Con, the main sheet will subtract 10 automatically. And then, so I have an inventory with me for Gen Con. And then main sheet tells me what I'm sitting on. And at Gen Con, if I sell out, which is usually, I do really well at Gen Con. So it's kind of like, I know what's going to move. And if I sell out, then I know what I have to reorder. And if I have to, but the show tells me, like, so for Gen Con, it's one of those shows where I don't have to play a guessing game. But something like Dragon Con, like we do Planet Comic Con, right? I can't get a decent read on that show. I know a few pieces that are moving. So this year I won't go as like you saw my setup last year. I bought everything with it. And I sold well, but I had all this extra stock for no reason. So this year I'm like, I'm gonna bring. I moved to a table next to you guys actually, and I'm going to bring less stuff with me because, like you said, it's not a bad thing to sell out. So if I sell out of stuff, I'm leaving with less stuff, and I'll be like, hey man, I still have stock in this, just not here. Maybe.
Yeah, and again, just like you said, it really depends on the show. Last year, we did great out of Salt Lake City, but we saw that we only sold, I think, 2 small, like really small originals and 1 larger format original.
Mm-hmm.
But at Kansas City, we sold 6 originals, and I think like 3 or 4 of those were the larger formats. And so we were just we were really surprised at that. And one of the people came up to the booth, was talking to Tawny, was like, oh yeah, she's like, you would be amazed at the size of like the pagan, Wicca kind of community here in the Kansas City area. And so, that's the same thing as Tawny knows now. We got to have some originals on the wall, walking into Kansas
Right.
City. And, you know, the number of type of prints and things like that, we can look at it, like you said, per show. And that's really where it gets complicated now is not only are you trying to order stock, but you're trying to order stock tailored for each individual show.
Right.
And that's why we always tell people, like, I made this much of the show. No, you didn't. That's not what you made. That's people need to remember the difference between, what gross and
That's
net
what I was gonna
profits
say.
are.
Yeah, people don't know the difference between gross and net, and even when I talk numbers to like my cousins and my family, and they see my numbers, they're like, "Holy crap!" I'm like, that's the gross number. This number way down here is what my net profit, which is
Well,
way
there's.
less.
I was gonna say there is. What was that YouTube video you shared with me? Dustin's video
Yeah,
about where
Panzino.
he covered. Yeah, where he covered cons, and I think what did he give for that number? It was something like
He has this.
he
So that
made like
everyone.
230,000, but once all for the year.
Correct.
But like once all the expenses were removed, it was like a net of like 45
He has like
or something like
45 or
that.
65,000. It was like a regular.
It was a fairly like low number in the
Yes.
like compared to what the gross was. Yeah, which is like like when you factor all
But
that
they get
stuff,
hyped
it,
up.
it
But
eats
artists get
away.
hyped up by the gross number, right? They're like, "Holy shit,
Yeah.
he made this much money." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, but that's the expense of running a business. You're not calculating that for some reason."
And really also, what they have to remember is, if you make, like you said, 200,000 and 50,000 of that at the end of the year is actually, pure take home profit, that's still crazy good percentage. Like when you talk about companies like Nike and, Starbucks, these big companies, if they make 1 or 2% profit on each item they sell, that's actually pretty darn good because they just sell in
Mhm.
such enormous volume.
Right.
Of course, as an artist, you got much smaller volume, you're going to want to make, a good bit more. But yeah, it's that big number that the artists always look at, and they don't drill down and see what all of the expenses are, and when it comes right down to it. And then again, if you've got that good budget and you do this show and you make 12,000 at the show, but by the time everything's said and done, let's say you're down to 5,000. If you know that you can live off $2,500 a month, that's food and something covering your head. Now you have 5,000. You have enough to survive 2 months, and that should be where you're at. You're like, all right, I've got enough to survive 2 months. Maybe I'll keep enough to survive a month and a half. So
Right.
I can take half that month's expenses, 1,250. I'll take that and invest that back into the business. Maybe I'll buy a flourish panel. Maybe I'll buy some lights. Restock certain things. And when you keep track of those things and know what you need to specifically spend that money on, life becomes a lot easier. You're spending money on what things you're going to sell. You're not going overboard with your budget, and you know exactly where every dollar goes. Because that's really, when I heard that there's this new product, I forgot what it's called, but it'll go through and find reoccurring things that you're paying for that you forgot that you've had. When I heard about it, I was like,
Oh yeah.
how do people just forget that they
Yeah.
have a subscription or something, like the money's just going out the window, and they don't even realize it. It's really it was kind of
That's
baffling, but that's how it works.
so the thing I have is it's QuickBooks Simplify, and Simplify literally will like track and say, "Hey, just so you know, it'll say you've got a bill coming up in at the end of, and it's usually like my mortgage or my car payment or something, because I ain't cool like you, Sam. I didn't pay my car off yet, but and it'll basically like just but all it is a reminder. Like I don't know how people are forgetting to pay their car payments, but it says like, yeah, I know that's coming up because I have a calendar. I keep track of all this stuff. But I was gifted this app for a year, so I thought, all right, I'll give it a whirl, but it's basically a more robust version of Mint that I was talking about earlier, because
Right.
it'll do a graph that it breaks it down a little more concisely for you. And people might not need something like this, but I feel like it's worthwhile because it also, what it does is it tells you, like, because you have to have your bank accounts in there, right? That's how it's tracking everything for you. So it'll be like, hey man, this is how much money you have, like, and this is how much money you're about to spend, like, and then do you have anything left at the end of this? No, you're doing something wrong, like, figure it out, and like, like you were saying with the some of these products and stuff, like people, like, I've talked to artists who are just like, "Man, I don't keep track of my prints. They're just prints, and I just, whatever I have in the box is what I have in the box. And if I need to order more, I order more." I'm like, they're just prints until the cost of those just prints starts adding up, and now you're sitting on
Right.
more than 100, 200 prints. And again, these are lessons I learned that I try to pass on to artists. Like metal wise, like every show I was reordering metal, and then I finally was like, I had this epiphany one day where I'm like, what are you doing? Figure out what you're not selling, figure out what you are selling, and only be ordering that. And if there's something there that I didn't order that someone happens to want, I tell them I can order it and ship it to them, because I'll be like, I just don't have it here. Same thing with playmats. But again, it depends on who you are and what show you're doing. Like, obviously for Kansas City, Tawny wants to bring more originals. Gen Con, I always bring more playmats because I know they'll move. Right, Prince Playmats Metal Gen Con, it's just its own beast. But something like Dragon Con, I move mainly prints and playmats. Like metal doesn't really move there for me. It's eye candy. So, and at this point, I have demo metal. Like I would always bring new metal with, but I'm like, what are you doing? Just keep the demos in mint condition and use those over and over. But it all comes down to what you're saying, budgeting, man. It's all about budgeting. So
Yeah, and all this, like I said, everything, all this information I'm sharing, all this stuff, it really, I just want people to understand that I try to keep this all sort of at the basic level, because once you understand the basics of it, then that's when you can start to, uh, personalize it to how it's going to work for you. See, what's going to work for you. I always tell people that anybody who says they have the one size fits all, one stop shop for anything, they're just trying to sell you something. They're trying to
right.
sell you their idea, their gimmick, so that that's where you spend your money at. And I always tell people, they're like, what's the best book, to read for finance? And I'm like, I've read like 6 of them. And from those 6, I'll take a few things from each one of them that I think is like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna, take this from this book, this from this book. I have never read a single finance book that just had all the answers in it, or what worked, for me 100%. Nothing does. You have to learn the basics, and then you can learn, really what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, because it's very similar to whenever anyone asks, like me, or I'm sure Alan, you've heard this or whatever. If someone asks like, "Hey, what's like the book I should get for like figure drawing?" or what is the one book I should get for like an art thing? It's like, well, I could
There's
tell
a
you a few,
bazillion.
but I like, yeah,
Yeah.
like me myself, I've read about 15 to 20 different figure drawing books, and there's some of them that, like, yeah, I just throw away entirely. Where it's like, yeah, there's nothing useful in here that's not better explained somewhere else. But not a single one is a one-stop shop. I've had to glean stuff from
I
every
like to
little
tell
piece.
people to get Drawing the Marvel Way. It's like, if you can't get through that,
Even that, like, it has good stuff in it, but that shouldn't be the end all be all.
no. There's no, because it depends on who you are and what solution you're trying to find.
Yeah, and I've got a note here. It says, look local, because, like you said, people always try and chase the shiny ball, or, someone might be listening to this and be like, oh, Alan does metal. He does well with metal. I should definitely use metal. And it's like, just because it works for Alan's stuff doesn't
Yep.
mean it's going to work for your stuff.
Exactly.
And, there's a couple pieces of tawny stuff that I'm like, we could probably put some of this stuff on metal, but it's because we've put it on literally everything else, and it's sold on every piece of media we've put it on, because
Mm-hmm.
we've learned over
And it
time
feels like a sure bet.
what works. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's really just the sure thing.
I
And
mean, yeah. I mean, what you just said is exactly right. I've had people come to me at shows and like, I printed this piece on metal and it's just not selling. And I'd be like, you want me to tell you why? Like, or it's just like, cause I'm like, sometimes it's because it's too dark, sometimes it's just because it doesn't fit on metal. Like, people, it's just not eye catching to people. Like, my stuff is very specific. It works well on metal. It was a happy accident.
And remember what your time is worth, because I've come across so many people who I've told them things like, you know, if you cut down on how much you go out to eat, you know, you'll be able to save some money. And, a very popular excuse is things like, oh, I'm real busy, I've got this, or, oh, that's not worth my time. And I think people tend to overestimate what their time is actually worth,
Right.
because I'm like, it's what you want to spend your time on. It's people that say like, oh, I don't have time to work out. No, you're just not making that a priority. You have time to do these things. With all the technology we have, I remember talking to my grandmother, and she said, I keep hearing people talk about the good old days. She's like, but I used to wring out clothes and have to hang them out to dry, and
Yeah.
she. She's talking about, milking cows and all this stuff. And she's like, I think people forget, how hard it was back then. It's with all the technology and things we have enough stuff that you have the time to do certain things. You have the time to keep track of your stock, of your inventory, to write out a specific budget.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, you might have to put off watching that new show for a couple months. There's always things that you can cut out of your day to make
Yeah.
time to do these basic things, to set up this budget, to take stock of your inventory, to keep track of what you're selling. 'Cause like I said, it's a business, and every business, it's a reason that these businesses, they've got their bookkeepers, they've got, bookkeepers in every little department. They know, every dime, every
Right.
penny that comes in, every penny that goes out. These big companies keep track of all this. They keep track of their inventory, and they use that to determine, what to buy next. And it's like, you're a business, you really have to do the same thing. And I mean, even, I don't even have a business anymore, but just personally, I keep track of where everything goes, how much coming in, what's going out. They say there's two ways to become a millionaire. One, you make more than what you spend, or two, you spend less than what you make. And that's really the answer. And you put the rest into savings, and with a little bit of luck, you might have something at the end of the day that help you actually retire, make life, a little bit easier. But I want to look over some of the questions you sent, Alan, just make sure that we're answering everything that you wanted to talk
Sure,
about.
sure.
I think you
Uh,
covered a lot of it, to
I
be
think you got
honest.
most of it. I said, what are the key investment strategies based on how we make our money, which you touched on. Budgeting, we touched on. What shouldn't we waste money on, we touched on. What do you think of
yeah,
people when you say you got to spend money, we got? And then you talked about budgeting for the thing about tips on how to budget and plan for your money flow when you have net 30, net 60. I see that a lot. The reason that I love the fact that Andrew brought that up is because I see that a lot with artists where they do these jobs, they know it's going to be net 30, and some of these companies will go all in net 60 even though for whatever reason they're not paying on time.
Yeah.
And these artists will be like, I don't have enough money to make my rent, I don't have money for this, and I don't have money for like things they need to pay for, rent, food. And I'd be like, okay. And I've had, over the years, especially during the pandemic, when some of these artists were not making enough money, and I happen to have a surplus of money from the year before, I lent out money to a couple people, just be like, look, I'm gonna give you some money to help you pay your rent. Pay me back when you get it, you know. And that was just me trying to be nice, but it's like I need that money back. Unfortunately, this is not. I'm not giving it to you for life. I need it back. It's part of my savings, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't want to see you living on the street, you know. But also, they had to listen to me lecture them about what have you been doing in the last couple of years where you didn't save enough money where you can't even make your rent, what, for 1 month after everything's gone topsy-turvy on you, or if you're working a job and you have to wait 30 to 60 days to get paid and you're panicking because you didn't get paid yet. That tells me you're budgeting poorly. Like,
Yeah.
There's artists in our group who, every one of us has a hobby. I have books, right? I buy all these fucking books. I read comic books. I like, I like music, so I buy music, and I like original art. But these are things I started buying after I started making extra money. All those originals on the wall, I've talked about this before. I couldn't buy any of these for years. And then over the years, I started saving I put aside money after every show. I budgeted X after every show, saying, this is going to be fun money at the end of the year when I go to LuxCon to buy some originals, And even then, I'm not spending they're originals, so they cost some money, but not. I'm not buying a Van Gogh over here,
Right.
So like I'm spending within my reason, And now my budget's gotten a little tighter, and I'm just trying to readjust a lot of things because we have 2 kids now. So it's like, people are like, how much more money is it? It's a lot, man. Shit costs money, you know.
Kids are.
Yeah. If you, it
Yeah.
was.
Our kids are a money sink.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I created uh, this PowerPoint demonstration, and it talked about basic finance. And at the time, they said that the average to raise a child from birth to age 18 was about $350,000
Yeah.
over those
That
18
sounds about
years.
right.
And that's average. That's, your kid's not going to Montessori Academy on that. That's going to be quite a bit more. And yeah, it's crazy. But like I said, when you have that basic budget down, when those things come in, it's easy to adjust.
Right.
The best laid schemes o' mice and men, gang aptly a gay. It's that saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Robert Burns, 1785.
I don't know if you're right. I just have to go, yes.
No, Robert Burns, 1785. The poem to a mouse is where that
That's
saying
cool.
comes from, and it really is. It's like, if you have that plan, sure, things are going to change. It. You're going to have another kid. Something's going to happen.
Right.
But when you have the plan, it's easier. It's easier to adjust. And like you said, when people, I think one of my it's my favorite holiday movie is Christmas Vacation. You know,
National Lampoon's
Chevy
Christmas
Chase.
Vacation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
yeah. It's I and I love that movie, and I always tell people, I said that all of his stress, all of his trouble came from the fact that he spent money before he had it,
Yep.
because he knew he was going to get a Christmas bonus. Guess what? You didn't get the Christmas bonus. It's the same with any job you take. Until that money is in your hand, it is not
Yeah.
real.
Right.
You don't have it, and uh last year, we actually we got a raise where I work, and everyone, was talking about, oh, how what are you guys going to do? How are you going to spend this extra money? All this blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, it's not real to me.
You don't have it yet. It's
It,
not in your account yet.
yeah. When I was in the army, I learned that sometimes the pay would get screwed up. You would get more money sometimes than what you should have, because they thought you were on TDY for a month, but you were only there for a week. So then they would come and they'd take that money back. And I found that they took money back a lot faster than they gave it to you. So even when I was a private specialist sergeant in the army, if I saw money come in that I couldn't account for, that I was like, okay, that's
Right.
new. That's different. That immediately went into my savings. And I was like, I'm not touching that until I confirm that this money is actually mine.
Right.
And now, if they're like, hey, you guys are getting a raise at the beginning of the year, all federal employees are getting a so and so raise. No,
Wait,
I,
wait.
yeah, nothing is being spent until I actually have that money. And it's
Right.
same with, when you guys do these jobs that don't pay out till 30, 60, 90 days later. It's that money's not real until you have it in your hand.
Yeah. I mean, I just closed out a freelance project, and I have a list of things I want to spend some of that money on. And my wife was like, "Why?" Like, so this bookshelf, for example, is brand new. And she's like, why haven't you bought the bookshelves yet? I'm like, I haven't gotten paid yet. Like, it's
And
not in,
it's not a
it's,
life or death thing.
yeah.
It can stay on the
And,
floor longer.
right. So I'm just like, it's fine. The books are not going anywhere. And
Yeah.
then, she had extra money in the budget. So she's like, just go buy them. So they're, before the holidays are over. So they're there. And then, basically the check that I'm waiting for didn't come until today, literally this
Oh, wow.
morning. And I deposited it. And then I cut her a check for the bookshelves to be like, here, put this back in the account, but that's a very rare thing. But, I'm very much like you, Sam. I don't spend, I got to see it in my account before I'm going to be like, I need to buy this, this, and that. Let's go,
Yeah, same. I pretty much have that for myself mentally. Like there's certain things that I know, like, yeah, like that's gotta get spent one way or another, like say groceries kind of deal. But anytime it's a personal expense, it's like, no, I
Dude,
have to justify.
and it's taken me years to get to that state of mind where like if I want to buy something for myself, I'm just like, do I really need this right now? Do I really? And I sit on it.
Yeah.
And I've told
Yeah.
Tawny
Oh my
this.
God. Yeah. Give the cool off period. It's
Well,
astounding
I do a thing for
how
like,
much that happens when you realize, like, yeah, I don't need that.
right. I mean, I do a thing, and I said this to Tawny. I said this to some artists in the group about for like Amazon is the easiest way for most of us to just buy something, right? And you're just like, I'll just throw in the cart, I'll buy it, done. So what I have a habit of doing now is all week long, I see random ass shit I want, I throw it in my cart. It's just sitting there. And usually at the end of the week, I look through that cart and I'd be like, I don't need half. I don't need it. I don't need any of this. Sometimes it just zeroes out. I just delete or save for later and it just zeroes out. But sometimes there's something in there that I do need, like a memory card. So I'm like, that thing I do need for the thing I'm going to talk about later. But so that $100 I had to spend. But there was stuff in there like a Gundam. Did I need it? No. Do I want it? Yes. Like I absolutely want it, but I didn't buy it. I took it out of the cart. So, but I also want to touch on the thing about you said, what's your time worth and cooking at home. That's another thing. That's a lesson I actually learned from Tawny and you actually, Sam, because you guys cook a lot at home. And when Nance and I were, when we had the first kid, we had a habit of going out to eat all the time because we'd be like, I'm so tired. I don't want to cook right now. Let's just go buy something. And then when we bought the house, I started budgeting a lot tighter, just to be like, I wasn't like a tyrant about it, but I was just like, listen, we're eating out a lot. And then one day I did the math. I said, like, just for the week, right? I was like, oh, Monday we went to Tongs and we spent $75. That's literally, that could have been 3 days worth of groceries,
Yeah.
And then I'm like, on Wednesday we went out and we spent like $40. I forget whatever it was. The total at the end of the week was like $250, almost $300 on just eating out. And if you're spending $300 on eating out, that's literally like 2 to 2.5 weeks worth of groceries, depending on how you eat. So once I showed her that, visually seeing those numbers kind of shook her a little bit, And I'm not saying we don't eat out. We'll still go out maybe once a month, but I find ourselves eating like fast food a lot. Maybe once. It used to be once a week because we'd just be out all the time, and we'd be like, my kid eats McDonald's, let's get McDonald's. But at some point I was like, we got to stop this because it's adding up, and I get the state of mind of like, so my wife, she has a full-time job and she makes some decent money. So she does have a little bit of that, like, we can spend this money. It's like, I don't want to, like try to get on my level. And so I showed her some of like, so I started investing. I got a financial advisor, started investing some money into Roth IRAs and such. I show her those numbers, so she can see a retirement plan now. And, I like when we bought this house, we sold our condo. And I took a chunk of that money and invested it. I took some of it, put it into a savings account for stuff to build on this house, that any repairs we needed. And I took another percentage of it and I put it into an emergency fund. So and she was really shook by that investment number because it's much larger. It was like 75% almost, right? And I was like, that's for our retirement. Like, this is money that didn't even exist in your world until we sold that condo. Like, so we don't really need it. But you don't want to just leave it sitting in a savings account because it's just sitting there, not making any money for us. So, so I put it in, and you can see the retirement. I think people need to visually see, like the app I told you about. I think people need to visually see what's happening with their monthly budget before they start actually adjusting it. Like you were saying earlier at the top of the show, mental math just doesn't work. You can't. And I'm saying that as an Indian who sucks at math. Okay, like you gotta. I write it up. That notebook I showed you, I write every at the end of each day at the show, count my money, if I have time, and I check my numbers and I write it all down. So I have 4 days worth of numbers, and I do the math real quick. And before the show starts, I've got a number of what I spent to come to that show. So I already know how much I need to make at the top of the show to get out of the red. Essentially, right? Did I get out of the red? Did I make all the expenses I spent to get to this booth? Now I'm in the black, right?
Yeah. And when it comes to like that, saving and all that, I think what I try to remind a lot of people is that when I first started working for the government to today, um, my my income has increased quite a bit. I've worked hard. I've gotten 2 promotions,
Sure.
and I tell people, I'm like, the amount my yearly uh, pay has gone up a lot. My
Mm-hmm.
monthly bring home has not gone up much because all that extra started going toward paying off the house and going toward retirement. Because when I
Right.
first started, I was putting, you know, $50 a paycheck, into my retirement, $100 a paycheck into my retirement. And this last year I was doing 750 a
Right.
paycheck into retirement. And so I tell people, it's like, if you know, once you get used to living at this level, coming back down to this level, that can be tough. You know, Tawny and I at one point were both government contractors.
Mm-hmm.
We were making pretty good money. And I like to tell people that the way that we were spending our money, uh, when we got cut to where it was now only one of us making money, making less than half of what we were making before,
Mm-hmm.
but we take twice as many vacations. We've got, we were putting more towards retirement. We're doing, and people are like, how are you doing that? Well, we cut a lot of our spending down,
Right.
and it just changed things. It was a complete game changer. And so if you can get comfortable living, where you're at, and then as you make more, either put that into savings, put that into, whether it be an emergency savings or retirement savings, stuff like that. Like you said, retirement savings are great because you can't touch them without being penalized. You
Right.
know, Once it's there, it's there. And then, also investing some of that back into your business,
Right.
you know, improving your setup, improving your products, improving, what you're doing. And, eventually you get to a point like we finally, we've hit a point almost, it'll be, next year if we hopefully, like I said, pay off the house this year. Next year, we're going to get to a point where we're going to be like, okay, the emergency fund's stocked up. We've maxed, what we can this month toward retirement savings. Uh, Everything else is paid off. We're going to have a little chunk of money at the end of the month that we're just going to be like, oh shoot, now what do we do? And it's like, okay, that's when we get to take that and really be like, all right, where do we want to go for vacation? You
Yeah.
know, do we want to start saving up for a new vehicle? Do we want to start, like, what do we want to do with this extra money? And, that's when things get really nice. And we have to remember, I think a lot of young people get in trouble. Like my coworker's kid that, I talked about, kids look at their parents and they see all this stuff they have. Yeah, kid, you didn't see it when mom and dad were living off ramen, living in a 1 bedroom apartment.
Right.
You came in at the good part.
Yeah.
You didn't live back here. And I feel like
Excuse me.
young artist or any young business person coming in to uh, into the sector that they want to work in, they're looking at Allen, they're looking at some of these people making this big money, and they're like, they're an artist, I'm an artist, obviously we're making about the same, we're gonna, I'm gonna spend like Allen does. And that's bad. You never saw Allen living in the little apartment, hoping he
Yeah.
gets this, payment to buy some ramen.
I mean, I tell people, like, when I used to live at U of I at one point, I was living off of poor man's sandwiches. It was literally just a piece of meat. I put some mustard on it. I would eat it just to push that hunger down for a couple hours, right? And I would get right back to work. And that's how I lived for a couple months, which is not my finest point, you know. But that's why I try to tell people, like, I've been there. I've learned it takes time, and once you get comfortable with budgeting, looking at those numbers, not stressing about them, because it really isn't. There's no reason to stress. And then putting aside that money. My advisor gave me good advice back in the day, which was, it doesn't matter if you can put aside $50 or even $20. Just put aside something, right?
It gets you in a habit.
Yeah, get into the habit of doing it. And as you gain more and you can actually put more in, then you start putting a little bit more in each time. And eventually you'll get to, like what Sam was saying, he's putting almost 750 in. You can get to numbers like that. And then you're like, cool. And then I also, yes, I have money in a retirement fund I can't touch, but I also put some money into a taxable fund. So if there is an emergency, God forbid, and I need that money, I can get taxed on and just take it. So I'm not like completely like, I don't want to get fined for it. I'm just like, you can get taxed, take the money if you need it. And, but these are all things these are things I learned, man. And that's why like talking about it, I think helps. And like Tani has been on enough calls where she talks about budgeting. So I can tell some of these artists just they're listening, but they're also like, nah, I'm fine.
Half listening, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a website where you can buy government bonds directly from the U.S. government. It's you buy directly from the U.S. government. And of course, I can't remember off the top of my head, but when they have 4-week bonds, so you just buy this bond. It's 4 weeks. I mean, you're getting back. I mean, if $1,000 bond, I think cost you like $998,
Sure.
for the bond. End of the month, you get back $1,000. So for a while, one of the things I was doing that for my like emergency fund was I had $8,000 in emergency fund. I bought a 4-week bond this week. I bought one the next week. I bought one the following week. I bought one the following week. So I had 4 of those stacked up. So every week I was getting $2,000 returned to me that I would then have it automatically reinvest into another one. So my thought was, if I had up to an $8,000 emergency, big emergency, $8,000, I could put all 8,000 of that onto my credit card. By the end of the month, all 4 of those would have come to maturity, and I would pay off that credit card before any interest hit it. All at the same time, by the end of the year, I was making something like, $300 or $400 off just letting this roll over. And it was far more interest than any like bank was offering at the time. And so, there's little things like that, that you can find. And I found that when you talk money, I have a couple coworkers that I enjoy talking with these things about. When you talk money, you learn about stuff like this. You learn about like bond ladders. You learn about, IRAs. You learn about all these different little tricks and tips that, people do. And like one of my coworkers, I told him, I said, yeah, I'm there's a good chance, we're going to pay off the house next year. I said, I'm going to sell my portfolio. I'm going to take what's in there. I'm going to pay off the house. And he said, well, yeah, but how's your taxes going to look? I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, what kind of profit do you plan to make on this? And I was like, I don't know, probably around $15,000 to $17,000 in profit. And he said, yeah, at the end of the year, you're going to have to pay taxes on that. So I'm not paying a dime of tax. I'm not going to pay a dime of taxes on it. And he's like, how do you figure? I said, well, let me break this down for you. It's all long-term capital gains tax. Next year, it's going to be around $29,000 is the standard deduction. So I take that off of what Tawny and I make. I take off, health insurance and all that off what we make. Any state tax we paid, things like this. All this stuff's coming off there. And he said, okay. I said, so my goal is to fall underneath 85,000 taxable income. And he's like, okay. I said, I want you to look up and see how much you have to pay on long-term capital gains tax for a jointly filing married couple that's under $85,000 in taxable income. And he looked it up and he said, it's zero.
Yeah.
That's right. Huh. Zero.
That's
So, you know,
interesting.
yeah. So if you were to save money and invest in whatever you feel comfortable in investing in, and you know, let's say people are always like, oh, you know, I'm investing in Roth. I enjoy Roth. A lot of people enjoy Roth. Um, but really, if you were to invest and let's say you retire and your income is under, you know, that threshold, and your stuff's sitting over here in a private account and you're just selling stock, it's all tax free anyhow because you're underneath that capital gains tax. Now, capital gains tax could go up, you know,
Right.
you know, things could happen uh, that aren't, you know, guaranteed. So I like the guarantee that my Roth isn't going to be taxed when I withdraw it,
Right.
you know, years down the road. I like that guarantee. However, those guarantees change as well. You know,
Right.
Warren Buffett said, you know, uh, I could never do this again today. And goes back to where I said, you know, people who are like, oh, you can do it the way I did it. If an artist tells you, do it the way I did it, or if anyone tells you, do it the way you can't. That time has passed.
Yeah.
Right.
That, you know, it's like, okay, I can look at the Rockefellers. All I got to do is buy some war bonds and invest in
Yeah.
steel and the railroad, you know, and I could make money like a Rockefeller. No, you can't do it. You learn the basics, you learn what other people have done, and then you
Mhm.
see how that plays into, you know, how things work today. And you come up with a plan that works for you.
That's the key.
Because
Come up with a plan that works for you.
because everyone wants to know, what do you invest in?
I can't tell you that.
It
Right.
doesn't really matter, you know. Warren Buffett says, you know, that diversity is a hedge against stupidity. And what he meant by that was simply, if you really know what you're investing in, you don't have to diversify as much. You can invest in just a few things. Which,
Yeah.
like we just showed, if you know exactly what is selling at your booth, you don't have to diversify and buy all this other crap. You can hone in on the things that work for you. You can sell those things and you can make it work for you. You
Yeah.
know, you don't have to spread that out and chase the shiny ball.
It's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
But
That's all.
also, you know, people like Warren Buffett, they spend their entire lives just to invest in the few things they invest in, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, even my financial advisor, like stuff we've invested in, I only own, you know, like I would say like 12 or 14 different things that I've invested in. And it's just because they're working. Like Nvidia is one I definitely invested in because it's like their stock just rocketed off. But like I every time I approach him with, should I be looking at new tech? Should I be looking at, you know, new stuff? And he'd be like, why? The stuff you have is working just fine. You want to invest more into the stuff you already have. Like there's no reason for you to like invest in this new company that no one's ever heard of that just showed up on the market, right? Like why risk it? You like when you know
Yep.
this works, you know? So it's just like, oh, well, okay. Because in my head, I was always like, you should always be looking for something new, but you don't have to. If you make some good decisions early on, and it works, stick with it. And now that's, you know, on the other hand, when there's stuff that doesn't work, I'll use Beachbody as an example because I invested in Beachbody because I heard their stock was going to change, blah, blah, blah. It tanked. And I won't name the artist that told me to invest in it, you know? And I immediately just dumped it, you know? And then luckily I didn't invest a ton in it, you know? And then every once in a while you get lucky. Like I had Marvel stock from back in the day because I love comic books. So I invested in Marvel stock. That was my thinking. I like comics. I like Marvel. I'll just invest in some Marvel. I bought it cheap. I mean, what's considered cheap at the time, which was like $15 or something. Now Disney owns it, so that shit's gone up. I don't know what it's at now, but you know, it's a good investment, which I'll keep. You know,
Well,
if
you
you're
know, and it's
lucky.
funny you said that, you know, that like you like that because one of the things that Tawny has found with some of the products that she's bought, and again, when we're talking about investing,
Yeah,
you know, people always think about stock market, but we're also talking about, you know,
your
like
products.
art,
Yeah,
products. What, you know, what are we buying? What are we talking? And Tawny has always said, she's like, I just wanted this piece of art on a sticker so I could put it on my water bottle. She's like, because I think this looks cool. So I bought
Yeah.
it. And a lot of that stuff that she finds, because if you were making art that you truly enjoy, if you're making something that you like to make, that you are passionate about, like she does, her mind works a lot like the people who buys her work,
Right.
it's you see yourself in a lot of people come up to your table, sometimes. And trust me, we had a guy come up to us, Kansas City. He had like this Chiefs hat on and like a Chiefs jersey, and he just looked like this good old boy. And he's like, "Hey, how y'all doing?" He's like, "Man, I love your art." And he bought a bunch of stuff. And Tawny and I were just like, "Well, did not expect that, but hey,
Right.
don't judge a book by its cover." But
Yeah.
but really, when you're making this stuff, you can see what you like.
Yep.
I think that's a great point to start at.
Well,
Like
Brian
Tawny, she was.
Colin gave me advice way back in the day where he's like, Brian has always said he never makes a product that he himself would not want.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
was like, that is an excellent way of thinking. Like, do not make a product just because I'll use dice as an example because dice is a big deal. But people are like, I'm gonna make dice. It's like, why? Do you play dice games? Do you play D&D? Do you play anything that involves dice? No, I just see people selling dice and making money. Don't do it. Because for starters, you won't be able to talk to the product. Like, you'll be zero fun when you're trying to pitch that thing. Meanwhile, like I would love to make dice in my world because I play all the games. I love the dice. But Brian's the one to tell me, he's like, just make things you would want. Playmats, yes, I play games. Prints, I love hanging artwork. Journals, sketchbooks. These are things I draw in. The metal artwork, it's a cool. It comes down to the artwork hanging on the wall. Dice because I want to play dice games. I don't have stickers in my booth because I don't really enjoy stickers. People love stickers. I get it, and they will sell. Not my thing. Let it be somebody else's thing.
Exactly.
And that's what I keep telling artists:
Yeah.
like, stop looking at and then it comes back to like when people like started making metal because they're like, Allen's selling metal now and it's working for him. And some people didn't buy just small metal; they went and got the big metal like me, and I'm just like,
Oh, like the one that you charge like 1,000 for?
yes.
Kind
And
of
some
deal?
people are
Oh my
still
god.
like having trouble moving that big piece of metal, and I'm like, here's the thing. Not only is that something I enjoyed making, I can speak to that product because it's also from my own series, my own world. People can see the time, energy, passion I have for that piece of artwork. I didn't make a piece of artwork just to put it on metal and sell it. That's not gonna work. That's another piece of thing that one of my cousins told me back in the day. It was like when you make a thing just because you wanted to make some money, people can generally tell. You know.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I say just make the art because you love making the art, and let everything else fall into place, and you'll sort it out. Like Tawny's, like in the last year, I've seen her like figure out the products and just figure out lock in, and she's like locking in on things, which is like that's what's gonna start happening. Because I remember last year someone she'd asked me she asked me something like what do you put stuff on, what moves, and I'm just like, I can't answer that question for you. Like, I don't know. Stickers work well for her. Apparel works for her, and all this stuff's like, I don't know if my stuff will work in apparel. I've never really tried it. I made a couple shirts, people liked it, but did it sell? Beats the fuck out of me, So, do I want to make apparel? Yes, because I like awesome looking clothes, But
Yeah, and like I
it's a
say,
hard lesson for artists to learn.
yeah, and it's going to take a while. It takes a lot of trial and error, which is why you want to start small with a lot of this, with a lot of this stuff. And now, like I said, back to these local shows that she's just,
That is an
you
excellent
know,
place to test your product.
yeah. And she even said, she's like, I don't know why I hadn't started with so much of this. And then, you know, she, she really started thinking about it, and she was like, I think I just hadn't done a lot of these small shows because some of the first artists that she encountered that she spoke with were like, oh yeah, we don't do little shows, that stuff's not worth our time, that stuff, you're not going to make enough money at it, blah, 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 all this stuff. But now that she's doing them, she's like, it's one day, it's one Sunday afternoon,
Dude, you work one
that
day,
we
made a couple
go.
$100, you're
Yes, like
like,
not a whole thing.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, one day, I think we spent all of 8 or 9 hours. We made like 500 or 600 bucks,
That's a
and
win.
we learned, I say that a lot of them is great because if these products, if you can move them at one of these tiny shows with 80 to 100 people at it, you take those same products and go to a show with 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 people, that's really going to show you what's going to sell.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, 'cause if it moved here, it's definitely the chance of it moving in a larger quantity, at this bigger show, it's great. And again, with the snowball, she's like, okay, well, I just made $600. I'm going to buy $600 worth of prints or whatever product she
Right.
needs, for the next big show. So by the time we get to, Kansas City Comic Con this year and Salt Lake Comic Con this year and some of the shows towards the end of the year, those shows are going to be completely paid for. All the stocks are going to be paid for, rooms going to be paid for, everything is going to be paid for, so that by the time we come home from those shows and we say, oh yeah, the last show of the year, we made $10,000. We can say we made $10,000. That was
Right.
$10,000 in profit at the end of the
Right.
year, because all these shows throughout the year have paid off that show, has paid everything off, because we don't want to put anything on credit cards. We do not pay interest on anything. We keep everything paid off up to that point, and then at the end of the year, you have that extra money. Now, what are you going to do with that 10,000 at the end of the year? You should
Right.
probably take that to help, get you started on the next year.
Right.
Make sure you've got that budget. And again, I understand, before anyone leaves any comments, I understand I've got a good secure job.
Right.
We can live off my income. We have for years. But what's nice is when you can learn to live off one person's income and then you start getting a second income coming in, well, then
Yeah,
it's like,
it's
Now you're
great.
oh
investing
shoot,
really
this
well.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what this is. It's like,
So
that's just
that's
extra
so that's the
money.
same. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. Like people are always like, "Oh, your wife works." I'm like, "Yeah, she helps pay like the mortgage and get the food and stuff, and then I help with everything else, right? Like, yeah, but I also make if I have a good show, what you just did, I'm like, this is getting invested, right? Like, because my paycheck is essentially the bonus. It's the extra.
Yeah,
Like we don't need it really. Like we can literally live off of her paycheck if we had to because I know how to budget really well. But we're lucky enough where we don't have to, you know.
yeah. That's why I always tell Tawny. Tawny's like, oh, sometimes she's like, oh, I just don't feel like, I'm not making as much money as you are. I'm like, yeah, I understand you're not making as much money as I am, and that's fine. I said, because 2 years ago when we went to Hawaii, you paid for that.
Right.
It's like, you understand that, like, you paid for that because my income went towards everything that we needed.
Covered everything.
And
Yeah.
since that was budgeted well, your income could then go towards what we want to do.
Right.
And again, everything just comes back to budget. Again, I don't care if you're writing it down, if you're putting it on a spreadsheet, if you have, a product from Mint or some other place that has
You just
that,
need some way
great.
to look at it.
Yeah, you have to picture it. You have to have
Like
a,
if you need to
a
get a giant,
visual
I
image.
used to have a giant dry erase board that wrote everything down on. If that's what you need, just do it. If you need a friend to sit down with you and help you do the math and bitch you out for spending money on Taco Bell 3 times in 1 week, do it. Like also comes down. You talking about sharing numbers earlier. Like share your numbers with people you trust, right? Like I would talk numbers with Andrew all day. I talk numbers with Tawny all day. There are certain people in our community I will not talk numbers with because they're not trying to help.
Yeah.
They're not trying to help with it. They're trying to compete with it. And I'm just like, I ain't got time for that. I ain't
Yeah.
competing with anybody. I'm just trying to make a living here. So
Right,
talk with people you
right.
trust. Learn from what they've done. It might work for you. It might not.
Yeah. If you go on YouTube and search, I think it's a little bit called Act Your Income. Uh, and it comedian, he's just talks about how when he got into comedy, he was starting to make some money and he felt good about it. But then he went out with a buddy of his who plays in the NBA, and he's like, and I realized real quick that his income and my income were two completely different things. And he was talking about how, he wanted to try to keep up with this stuff. And he learned real quick, okay, I can't do that. You got to be able to act your income. You got to be able to, just admit that, all right, I'm not at that level yet.
Right.
I'm not making Allen money yet at shows.
You
I'm
keep saying that like I make a bunch of money. I don't.
You're the host of the show, man. I don't know. You're the only person I got in front of me right now
this is just a basic
to make
podcast.
to make you're the guy. I'm making
No.
making the point
Yeah.
there.
I got it.
But yeah, it's and well, I mean, and you have to remember, Tawny, she has artists come up to her shows and they're just like, "Oh, you're Tawny Fritz," and she's like,
Right.
yes, and they're like, "You're Tawny Fritz," and I'm like, "Babe, you got to remember, there are artists who have, a 6-foot table in Artist Alley here who have put everything they have into that little thing, and they
Right.
look at your setup." I was like, for you, you were big time for someone, regardless of where you're at right now. You were
Right.
big time for someone else. And so, yeah, I think it's important, to pass this information along and, let people know that it's great. You're doing great and you need to keep building it, but don't try to do this. Try to do what I did 6, 8 years ago,
Yeah. Learn from what I
and
did.
work up to this.
On a quick side note, I'll say a story about when I went regarding fans. I remember when I went bar hopping before I had kids. My friends decided to do something called a bachelor party. It's just dads to be, and we went bar
Oh
hopping
yeah.
and drank a bunch. And at one point, we went to this bar called Metropolitan. And as we're walking in, 4 people are walking out. They're like, "Hey, you're AllenPanakal." I'm like, "How fuck these guys know my name?" You know, like I just looked at them like, "Yes, that is me." And they're like, "We saw you at Gen Con." I was like, oh. And they're like, "We bought a bunch of stuff from you." And I'm like, "Oh." And my friend Rickon was like, "You have fans," like,
Right.
and I was like, "Holy shit!" And then they came back into the bar with us to drink with me, which was pretty fun, And then
Yeah.
I told them, I was like, I'm sorry if I don't remember you guys. It's really hard because you see so many people in one day, and then Gen Con's
Right.
4 days, and I'm just like, unless we interact all the time, I don't remember faces.
It can be a blur,
It
yeah.
could be a lot. So, but that was yeah. I just remember that was the first time I was just like, it's believe in your own hype, and yes, I do fairly well at some of these shows. People like Tawny knows my numbers, which I'm sure Sam, you know my numbers, but like some shows are a bust and some shows are just fine, but some shows are like you said, like the smaller shows. Like I'm doing a show called OhioCon in about 2 weeks, and that show just gives me money to budget towards the next couple shows. It is not one of my top tier shows, but I'm lucky enough where a friend of ours lives in Ohio, so my room is covered. I have to drive 6 hours from the city, so I calculate two times I have to fill up on gas plus food on my way up there, and the rest is just hanging. I hang at not Andrew Sides, Andrew Thompson's house. We do the show together, and I just drive home when the show's done. And I make enough money for to buy product for Kansas City, basically. But in a something twisted happened at Dragon Con last year where I didn't sell enough playmats, so I am sitting on a good amount of playmats still. So I've budgeted. I didn't have to budget as high, so I have a little extra money this time. So um, things like that can happen, and if you're doing a good job of budgeting and a good spreadsheet or a notebook or some way of managing how much inventory you have, you'll know exactly what you don't need to spend money on. So as much as I hate Excel or in Google Sheets, it's important that you set that up. And I had a friend help me set it up because I don't know how to write any of the goofy algorithms that take from this column and adjust this column. But my friend Mark is really good at it, and he spent a whole afternoon with me setting it up and then showing me how it worked. And it's probably one of the best things I ever did because like I said, that main page tells me exactly what I have because I have products sitting in the garage right under me, and I have products sitting in storage down the block. There's no way in fuck I want to go digging through that for a Morningstar playmat. Like, do I have any?
Yeah.
Well, according to my sheet, I should have 30 of them. And where did I put them? They're probably in storage. So that's a whole other thing we could talk about later. But since we're way over time here, let's just move on to the last part of the segment, which we normally talk about some cool thing that we want to show the audience or talk about. And I don't know, Sam, you did say you had something, right? So why don't we just start with you?
Sure. I just started reading this book. It's called Paddle Your Own Canoe.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's Nick Offerman. So if you've
Oh, I like
seen
Nick
Parks,
Yeah.
Offerman.
yeah, he plays Ron Swanson on
Yep.
Parks and Recreation. Yeah, and it's just a book about how he feels. We should live well, and good advice for life. And uh,
Is
I
it written
I
like Ron
really
Swanson?
no, I mean, it's definitely his dry humor. You start to
Okay.
find is definitely his dry humor is who he is.
Hmm.
And acting is a lot like art. It's like if you play the character that's genuine, kind of to you, uh, then it just comes off a lot more real. And so yeah, he's definitely got some parts in there that you're reading and you're like, okay, yeah, I can definitely see how this kind of inspired the Ron Swanson character. Some of these things in his life. But so far, yeah, it's been really good. And he says in there, that one of his tips is, you've got to learn how to do things for yourself. And it's like this. You've got to. Yeah, owning a house is very expensive, and it's more expensive if you don't know how to use tools. It's like,
I'm learning
yeah,
that. I've been learning that over the last year.
I'm pretty sure I told you about that before,
I
Alan.
am. I have.
Like I
Me,
learned
Andrew, and I have had this.
woodworking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am not. I told Andrew about this. I'm like, I am not a carpenter. Like things
I
have broken where I'm just like, there's always a YouTube video, so you can just look it up, right, and just be
Oh
like,
yeah.
this guy's video seems legit. Let's just watch the whole thing first. Don't just do it. Like
I got into woodworking solely because I wanted to start learning how to fix things around my house. And then I got a table saw originally to cut like oil paint panels back when I was doing oil paints. And then soon enough I started using that thing for other projects and stuff. And the next thing I know, I'm like building all sorts of manner of shit in our house and repairing things left and right.
I don't like
yeah,
it though.
it's nice. I installed a front storm door. I installed a new garage door opener, uh, garbage disposal, dishwasher. All these things, and it's always nice because what was it, a couple years ago, we had the front wheel bearing on our Forerunner. The only problem we've ever had with this Forerunner, front wheel bearing was starting to go out, and so I replaced both front wheel bearings in it, just mostly with Google and YouTube. And I told Tony, I was like, I got to buy like 5 new tools. Which whenever I get to buy a new tool, I like
Hmm.
it. I was like, I got to buy 5 new tools, and I still saved us around $900 from not taking it to a
Jeez.
shop.
You
See, you
know,
Yeah,
said you said bearings and right. So earlier my furnace has been making kind of a squeaky noise, and I had to look
Mhm.
it up. And my maintenance guy said it's probably one of your bearings, and he's like, start by just changing the filter and letting air flow better. It seemed to have helped for now, but he's like, yeah, that bearing's probably going. But either way, in the spring I have to change out the furnace and the AC, which I'm not going to do myself because that ain't in my wheelhouse. But I was just like, it's just got to get through winter, man. It's like
Yeah.
15 degrees outside. So it's like a weird squeal. I was like, what the fuck is that sound? Please. Like, I don't want to have to fix this. And it's a
yeah. The more
furnace, so it scares me, right? Because it's like literally like under us.
Yeah, the more you can learn how to do yourself,
Mhm.
whether it's budgeting or working on the house or working on your vehicle, the more you can do yourself, it definitely frees up a lot of money for yourself.
Oh, it will. I mean,
There-
anything electronical I won't touch. So
well,
For
I
me,
mean,
it's
that's
gas. We had the hot water
oh,
heater go out.
gas would be too. Yeah, if I had a
Yeah,
gas thing.
yeah, that's natural gas, and I was like, I'm sure
dude,
I could look it up. I'm sure I could figure it out, but every day goes by that the wife doesn't have hot water, it's not going to be great.
our
So
water heater like has a trigger and it just triggers it and starts up, which I didn't know. Like we had a day here which was super windy last year, and apparently the air pushed so hard from the exhaust it came down and
Hmm.
put out the pilot light on the boiler. And I went to take a shower
Oh,
and I'm like, why is this water cold and not getting hot? And I went downstairs and I realized there's no pilot light. So I
yeah.
quickly looked it up and I realized all I have to do is it's like starting a lighter almost. You just trigger it,
right,
you
yep.
know? But the whole time I'm like pressing it, I'm like, this thing ain't starting. How much gas is well, before I went in there to do it, I'm like, how much gas has been released into this room? You know, like, and I was like, well, this
Right.
carbon monoxide detector should go off. There's a dangerous amount, and so I like pressed it, and it luckily like by the third press, it just lit up, and I'm like, oh, okay, and then I
Yeah.
just let it run for an hour, and nothing exploded. So
But see, and a plumber would have come out and clicked it and been like, that'd be $50.
right.
That was God, when was this? I want to say it was like shortly after we moved into our current house, but before our daughter was born. I went out like shopping one day, like to Target or something, pick up some shit. And when I opened up my car door, the handle on the inside, like when something goes wrong, like you physically will feel it and be like, oh, so like something just went like haywire on this. Like I opened up my car door and the handle went too far out.
Oh, the
So I was like,
cable,
oh,
bro.
so it wasn't the cable. What happened was the handle itself, like the plastic catch on it that tells it like, hey, unlock for me now. Like that part broke off.
Nice.
It got like brittle and then broke off and whatever. So it wasn't catching, wasn't doing it, whatever. I remember when I looked up general quote of it because I was like, I don't want to take this into like a shop because as soon as I do that, like it's gonna get
They
roped in
gotta
or
like
something.
take
Like,
the panel off and everything.
yeah, it's gonna immediately be like $60 at least, just for them to take a look at it and be like, oh, well, it's this thing, and then here's the cost for this thing. But yeah, I remember when I did a rough like online look around on quote and stuff, like just to repair that stupid door. It was like a $150-$200 repair that was
Right.
quoted.
Sure.
The part itself is $10,
Yeah, it sounds about right.
and the actual repair itself is like, if you don't know what you're doing, it's about 30 minutes of your time, maybe like an hour if you're really unsure of like because what part of it is like you have to actually pry um the interior portion of the door off of it, and it feels almost like you're breaking the door even though that's how it's supposed to be because it's like all plastic tabs and stuff. But yeah, no, if you know what you're doing, it's like a 15-minute job. Like get in the door, change it, get out, and then cool, you're on to the next one if you need to. And yeah, man, that's like one of those like really, really big wins that you ever have where you're like, man, I just saved myself so much time and money, like
Right.
headache wise, just to do
I
this,
mean,
like just doing it myself.
I think I messaged you when we first moved in the house. The toilet handle, the it just
Oh
broke
yeah.
up here in the master room, right? So like nothing, like the chain, the works, and I was just like, well, that sucks. And it was like 9 o'clock at night, so I'm like, I'm just gonna drive up the street to the hardware store and buy a new one. I'll be right back. My wife's like, just wait
It's like
till like tomorrow. I'm like, but I want to use this toilet tonight.
now, yeah.
Like, so I like
We have
drove down the street, fucking looked up a YouTube video. I figured out how to replace the part, and my friend who's a plumber is like, that would have cost you like $200.
yeah,
Like because it's the time it takes him to drive out plus labor, and it's like a $20 part. So all right,
yeah.
well, let's get past this, and I'll talk about the thing I was going to show off, which is I got a Steam Deck. Ooh. If you
Not
play
just
Steam
a
games,
Steam Deck,
free Steam Deck.
a factory sealed Steam Deck. Yeah.
Don't give away all my secrets. Um, so like basically, if you play Steam games, you can play all your Steam games on here, and the deck itself will tell you which games work and which games won't when you go to your library. So like it says great on the deck, and then so it shows me all the games that are great on my deck versus all games. Supposedly all games can play on here, except Destiny for some reason is you can't play without getting banned. I
Oh, that's
like
odd.
it, but I hate the fact that it's huge, man. Look at the size of the screen.
It is big. Like
Like
like my wife got
as
one
big as
years
my
ago.
head.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's probably one of
I
these
don't know why
devices
anyone
for.
needs a deck.
So
I don't
here's
know
the
why
thing.
anyone
I
needs a
would
deck that
not.
big. That's a big deck.
I had no intention of investing in this thing by my on my own because they're not cheap. They're about $500. But I have a friend who hooked me up with one, so I'll play on it at home. There's no way I'm traveling with this thing. It's heavy. It's like
Yeah.
got to be at least 3 pounds, if not 4. So I was just like, cool. I have been playing games on it. I've been playing Warframe on it. Um, but there's certain things it's a battery hog. It feels like I'm carrying a little PC in my hand, is what it feels
And
like.
you
And
pretty much are.
yeah, you pretty much are. So That's the
Um,
coolest thing I've got now.
actually, real quick, I'll tell you right now, if yeah, for some reason it doesn't play Destiny well on that, what you could do is if you have your computer on, you could stream Destiny from it to your Steam Deck.
Oh, from Steam on here to here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then basically
What's
like
the purpose of that? Like, I might as well play on the computer.
well, actually, well, one thing, like, say for instance, you want to sit on the couch and you don't feel like being on your
Oh, then
computer.
okay.
And
That's
also,
true.
like, at least certain games, like you've probably have noticed, like certain games are like massive battery hogs with that thing.
So this thing
And
also like has to
streaming
be
it basically means the thing runs quiet and
okay.
consumes very little battery because it's just streaming. And as long as the internet's good, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't see any kind of lag or anything.
So I learned things on this too. Like you have to shut it down like a PC because
Mm-hmm.
it's like standby mode on this thing. Apparently drains 10% each day. Like it thing died before the show started. And then
Yeah.
apparently there's all this Reddit posts about how you have to set it up so it only drains 1% a day. Like you have to shut it down. I'm like, well, I didn't. Whatever. That's a minor. I'm not gonna complain about it. So I told you I spent $100 on an SD card. So the $100 is to pop an SD card in here because all the games, pretty much all the Steam games you have download onto this thing, and that's gonna take a lot of space. So that's my thing. That's what I got.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. I'm glad you explained that because I would have no idea what that was. And one day I would have asked Tawny what Alan's doing, and she would have been like, he's playing with his deck, and I would have been like, you guys share too much. Y'all share way too much.
I mean, for travel, I have a little Switch. I have a Switch Lite, which is you can literally fit in your back pocket. So.
Yeah,
Oh wait,
nice.
Sam, do you like retro games, like old school retro games?
The only games I really play are the ones, when Tawny's like, hey, you want to play this
Red Dead.
game with,
Yeah.
whatever games that I've played with you.
We
That's
literally just
about the
pull
extent of
Sam in to
games
play
I've
games
played.
with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll play some Lethal Company someday. You'll enjoy that. I was I was telling somebody about when we used to play Red Dead because Sam would just be like off, like hunting, as he is wont to do in the middle of a mission, and then we'd all be getting like mauled or destroyed by like a gang, and all of a sudden, people would just start dropping dead because Sam would be way in the way back, just sniping them, and I'd just be like, "Yes, let's go!" Like, what took you so
I know,
long?
I know my strength.
Yeah, which is funny. So, all right, Andrew, what do you got? Oh, you didn't have anything. We put the pressure on you.
Well, I just thought of it, like, because I know I shared it in like our chats or whatever in the past, but I don't think I've actually shared it on the show itself, and I
Sure.
don't know how well it's actually going to show up. But
Oh, that nib. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
See, that looks
way.
like a
Oh,
pen
jeez.
almost.
So it is. It's basically like a steel nib on the end,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a
So
very
this is
fine
a
point.
pen for his iPad, by the way, Sam.
Yeah, sorry,
Oh, right.
Drawn his
it's an
iPad.
Apple Pencil, but I just got this new nib a while back.
So that doesn't scratch
From
your iPad.
No, not really, actually. It's granted, I don't have like a heavy hand.
Sure.
And there's a lot of like, I alter a lot of my settings both in Photoshop and the Apple Pencil stuff, so it forces me to not have a heavy hand. Because I have had that in the past, and
Yeah,
I
I saw when
was
you
getting
first
like,
posted it, I'm like, that looks like it would like scratch while you're drawing. But I mean,
well,
yeah.
I used to get like repetitive stress injuries the same way a lot of other people complain about it. Like, oh, I get like carpal tunnel. It's like, well, stop. First off, stop gripping your thing like you're gonna snap it in twain. And then
Right.
turn all your
Twain.
settings way down low so it forces you to have a light touch. And
Right.
guarantee
Yeah.
like that's
So
gonna
yeah.
fix a lot of your shit. But yeah, no, I got this I got that with a screen protector that was sold with the same thing,
Yeah, I've
and
got like a
those
paperwhite
combined,
on mine.
and I had a paper like I was okay with it initially, and then it once it kind of gets worn, it's like it kind of loses a bit of its luster. So this one that I just got with the pen
So
nib, it's a magnetic one,
oh,
so it's not like laid down with adhesive. It's actually magnetic. Let me.
so the Paperlight, Sam, is on the iPad screens. We can lay a layer down so it feels like paper texture when you're drawing.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
So
and it
you
creates
can
kind of
kind
like
of
a
see
matte
it's got like a
surface
matte
onto it.
finish to it.
Yeah,
It's cool if some of us are trying to learn how to draw on an iPad, which I'm not that good at it. So.
it's fine. But yeah, no.
But yeah, it is fine.
Like I told you before, I think I talked with you about this before, where I was like saying like, oh, I'm not like after the initial like honeymoon period with like drawing with the iPad,
Yeah.
I kind of fell out with it. I was like, I'm
There was
not
like
really
a hype
drawing
where you're
on
like,
it.
this is awesome. I could draw when I'm traveling. And after a while, you're like, I don't really want to draw when I'm traveling.
Yeah, like
Like,
digital. I like the idea of like digital drawing, even though I work traditionally for a lot, even like carry around sketchbooks and shit. But it is always nice
sure.
to have that as an option.
It's a
But
good option to have, but I never
the
draw at
nib,
shows.
the nib. Well, yeah, I won't draw at a show
Except
or
maybe at
whatever.
LuxCon, because you're sitting around minding your own business and some Yahoo will be like, can you draw my sketchbook for me? And you're like, why?
Hey, dude, do you get that?
I get it all the time. I think I've
Really?
got I drew like a dumb robot in Claire's book one year, and I was so fucking high when I drew it, and after a while I was like, can I have that back? Like I didn't really want to draw that in there. And she's like, I like it. And I'm like, I hate it. So there's a very hated piece of art in one of her notebooks right now. And then last year, whose notebook did I draw in? It just happens. There's always somebody walking around the show just asking artists to draw. And it's always another artist, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, chill. All right.
They just want them all. But yeah, no,
I'm
yeah,
gonna close
that
this
pendant's
out at the
great.
end here, because we're way over time now. But
Yeah,
Sam, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
yeah.
I know
Thank you so much.
took a minute to get you on. That's just scheduling. Welcome to life. But I'll keep you posted on if anyone has any bad things or good things to say. But if there's any thing you want me to post under the video, like something you want me to point people at or a link or something, just have Tawny send it to me later and I'll add it there. But otherwise, this episode will air next Friday. Okay, let me double check.
Might be this. Oh no, yeah, next
No,
Friday.
the
Because
19th. So
yeah, last Friday was Cremora.
yeah,
Cryomera?
Chimera. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the 19th at 8 a.m. it'll go live. So if you want to share it with people, you can. No big deal if you don't. We won't hate you any less. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being on. I appreciate you. Give me a second to take us offline.